Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and you're watching the Technique of the Month from Digital Photo Magazine. This month we're going to try and recreate the work of the Belgian surrealist artist René Magritte. Now, this isn't a genuine Magritte image, unfortunately. No, sadly this is just a picture of me. So you'll have to make do with this, but it's the style of his work that we're going to try and recreate. It's a sort of surrealist image. So we're going to put a photograph where this green area is, and then put the same photograph inside of the newspaper. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is to make a selection, because we're going to cut this figure out from the green background and put it onto another photograph. And to make that cut, we're going to use the magic wand tool. So we'll just grab the magic wand from the toolbar, and all we need to do is to click anywhere on this green area to make a selection. So if I click sort of there randomly, it'll make a pretty good selection. Now I say pretty good, it's not absolutely perfect, it's close. And from a distance here it looks almost right, but have a close look and you'll see there are areas like, for example, here, this little sort of green area that isn't accessible from the background. You're going to need to add that in manually. That means you need to hold the Shift key, a little tiny plus appears next to your cursor, and when you click, you'll add to the existing selection. Now, I didn't quite get everything, look, it actually missed a little bit there, so again, we'll hold Shift and click on that area and add that in. Okay, let's just go across here, because there are some other areas as well where things get a little fiddly around the edge of my ear, for example, so we'll hold Shift and we'll add that area in there, and the same the other side. Actually did a pretty good job there, but there's a little tiny bit in there, so we'll just skim around the edges, making sure that everything looks okay. That looks pretty good. Yep, okay, that's fine. So once you've got the selection, or maybe just a tiny bit there, look, there we go. Now, once you've got the selection absolutely right, you can then start to fine-tune the edge, because at the moment it's kind of hard, it's kind of an unrefined edge. So we're going to try and tidy it up a little bit, and we're going to do that in two ways. The first way is to go to Select and choose Feather. Now we're going to feather this selection by 1 pixel. Now what that's going to do is to take the hard jagged edges and just smooth them off a little bit. But I'll warn you now, it makes no difference when you look at the edge of your selection. It'll look exactly the same whether you feather it or not. But it does make a difference, so don't miss the step out. Okay, let's go back to Select and we'll choose Modify, and this time we'll choose Expand. So we're going to expand our selection by 2 pixels. Now watch what happens as we look at the edge along the newspaper here. When we expand it by 2, it comes along on a much tighter line. So it avoids any weird green halos that you might get around the edge of your selection. Right, okay, so that's the basic selection completed. But at the moment we've got the background selected, and what we want is to select the figure. So we'll go back to Select once more, and we'll choose Inverse. Now we can go to Edit and choose Cut, and we'll cut the figure from the background. Now that's it, we've done that picture, we don't need it anymore. We can close it down, we don't need to save the changes, and we can move on to this. Now this is a picture, and we're going to put this in as part of the artwork, but of course this is where you come in. You can use your own pictures and your own creations and completely change the look of this picture by altering this background image. Right, let's go to Edit and choose Paste, and there we are. I magically appear back on screen. If you need to, get the Move tool and move the figure around. You've got a little bit of movement there. Make sure, particularly along the bottom, you don't have any sort of bits missing, because it will rather ruin the illusion. Right, okay, so the figure's in place. The next thing to do is to cut out these black areas here on the newspaper, because the idea with this is we want to see on the newspaper exactly what's in the background. So we're going to go back to that magic wand tool again, and we're going to click on the black area on the left hand side. Then we're going to hold Shift, click on the black area on the right hand side, so we've got 2 selections. Now as before, we're going to fine tune that selection. We're going to go to Select, we're going to choose, let's choose Modify first and choose Expand. It doesn't really matter which way you go, but we'll expand it by 2 pixels because that's the same as it was before. Then we'll go back to Select and we'll choose Feather, but this time I'm going to feather it more. I'm actually going to feather it by 10 pixels. Let's actually find 10. There we go, 10 pixels, and we'll click OK. So rather than having a very gentle feather, this one has a slightly bigger feather, so it kind of bleeds into the newspaper just a little bit more. At least that's the idea. So we'll go back to edit and we'll choose cut. Okay, so we'll cut those out. Boom, gone. And now you can see the effect. So it's kind of that surreal look. You can see you've got the viaduct going through there, and yet it appears as if there is a hole in the paper and you can see through. It's all very surreal stuff, very fun. But that's in the style of Magritte. But if you want to add your own personal touch, why don't you change things a little bit? For example, the picture in the middle on the newspaper. Let's see what we can do there. Now, so far we haven't looked at layers, so let's have a quick glance at them. Window and layers, and you'll find you've got two layers, one with the figure and one with your background image. Now we're actually going to collapse these down into one, so we're going to go to layer and choose flatten image. Okay, so those two layers now become one. Now if you haven't made any other selections, you can bring that last selection of the inside of the newspaper back. Go to select, and reselect should be available. So there it is. We've now reselected the inside of the newspaper. We can go to edit, and we're going to choose copy. Now, that's quite important. Choose copy rather than cut. So we're going to copy the inside of the newspaper, and we're going to go back to edit and choose paste. Okay, and that's going to paste it onto exactly the same spot that you copied it. So nothing seems to change in the picture, but you can see back on the layers here, we now have it floating on its own layer. Right, so we're working on that layer, the inside of the newspaper layer, and we're going to change it. And there's a couple of things we can do. The easiest and quickest one is just to take away the color. So let's go to Enhance, Adjust Color, and Remove Color. Okay, so we now have a black and white. It's a newspaper, it's a black and white newspaper, you've got a black and white image. Okay, another thing you could do would be to go to Filter and apply any filter you like. Let's just take one kind of at random. Let's take the first one, Colored Pencils. Here we go. So Colored Pencils, if you look on the preview, you'll see again it's only going to apply the filter just to the cutout of the newspaper. And you can change the settings in here. Let's just take the paper brightness down a little bit. Something like that. There we go. And that's going to give our newspaper a kind of arty look. And if you want to, you can go back to your layers, and you can take the opacity of that layer down a little bit. So rather than having an arty look black and white, you can have an arty look with a sort of a pastel color coming through. So there we are. There's 3 different ways that you can interpret this technique, and I'm sure you can come up with your own imaginative Magritte style images.